you think you know the story of the Magic Porridge Pot, a simple children's tale, told beside the fire, about a little girl blessed with a pot that cooked porridge whenever she asked. A tale repeated in nurseries, softened in picture books, and spoken as though it carried nothing heavier than a spoonful of oats. But what if I told you that this humble story is far older, far darker, and far more mysterious than we were ever taught? Hidden beneath its sweet-sounding surface lies an echo of rituals, a whisper of famine, and an artifact that archaeologists still debate. The story of a pot that never ceased to boil is not just about food, but about abundance, greed, and the uncontrollable forces of nature. What if the Magic Porridge Pot is not merely a fairy tale at all, but a fragment of something unearthed from forgotten graves and ancient ruins, still simmering with secrets? Once upon a time, in a quiet village on the edge of a forest, there lived a poor girl and her widowed mother. They had little to eat, and there were many days when hunger pressed against their bones like winter frost. One day, the little girl went wandering into the woods and met an old woman. The woman's eyes glimmered like polished stone, and her voice carried a strange weight. She handed the child a small pot, plain and unremarkable at first sight, but charged with enchantment. The old woman said, "This pot will cook for you whenever you say the words. Cook, little pot, cook, and it will stop only when you command. Stop, little pot, stop." The girl hurried home, and soon the pot filled with steaming porridge, enough to warm her mother and herself. No longer did they suffer hunger. Word of the pot's wonder spread, and neighbors marveled at the endless porridge. Yet one day, when the girl was gone, her mother forgot the words to make the pot stop. It kept cooking and cooking until porridge spilled from the pot, over the floor, down the streets, and into every corner of the village. People had to eat their way through the flood to survive, until at last the daughter returned and spoke the right command. Only then did the pot cease its endless boiling. From that day forward, the village remembered the strange event, and porridge was never looked upon with quite the same innocence again. And so, the tale ends in the way children know, with a lesson about caution and memory, wrapped in a magical charm. But the tale was not always told in this innocent form. The first written traces of the Magic Porridge Pot appear in the early 19th century, carefully recorded by the brothers Grimm in their Kinder und die Hausmärchen. Yet even then, it was not entirely a story for children. Early German audiences recognized the shadows beneath its surface: the fear of hunger, the chaos of abundance, the destruction caused when boundaries are ignored. Later retellings softened its edges. Victorian collectors rephrased it into a story of domestic virtue, stressing that the child was obedient while the careless mother unleashed chaos. 20th century publishers stripped the tale even further, turning it into a short moral lesson for children about remembering instructions. The threat of famine and the horror of uncontrollable food became little more than comic exaggeration. And yet, if we look deeper, the elements of the tale reveal its shifting role in culture. During eras of famine, the story reminded listeners of the fragile line between starvation and overabundance. In times of industrial plenty, the same story became a caution against waste and greed. It is remarkable how a single pot of porridge, endlessly cooking, could reflect entire society's fears and desires. The tale's journey across time shows us how myth does not remain fixed. It transforms, reshaped by hunger, prosperity, memory, and morality. What began as a story whispered by firelight took on the clothing of each new century. And yet, beneath the changes, something ancient still stirs. On closer inspection, many details of the Magic Porridge Pot mirror myths far older than the Grimm's collection. In Norse mythology, we find the cauldron of the gods, in which the boris was endlessly cooked each night, only to be whole again each morning. In Greek legend, the tale recalls the inexhaustible tables of ambrosia, food without limit, gifted to the gods. From Hindu traditions, we hear of the Akshaya Patra, a vessel given to the Pandava brothers during their exile, which provided limitless food until dishonor disrupted its blessing. Could it be that the little girl of the tale is not merely a poor peasant child, but the shadow of an ancient priestess or initiate, given authority over a vessel tied to fertility and divine abundance? The pot itself, plain in appearance, may echo the archetype of the cauldron of rebirth found in Celtic lore, where life itself is stirred, cooked, and renewed. The flood of porridge, often read as a comic mishap, may instead symbolize a natural force that humans struggle to control. It is the flood of the Nile, the spilling of grain from Demeter's hand, the uncontrollable excess of nature when divine boundaries are not respected. The forgotten command word, in this sense, is not mere forgetfulness but a rupture in the sacred dialogue between humanity and the gods. Thus, the Magic Porridge Pot is not simply a toy for storytellers. It is a mythic echo, a fragment of a ritual object that may once have been real. Archaeological records tell us that ancient European and Asian graves often contained miniature vessels, believed to carry food for the soul's journey. Could the fairy tale be a survival of those rites, disguised in the gentle rhythm of a children's bedtime story? If so, the girl and her pot belong not only to fairy tale but to the deep and mysterious vaults of human myth, where hunger, sacrifice, and abundance meet in a single vessel. In 1879, during an excavation in central Germany near the Thuringian forest, archaeologists uncovered a clay vessel buried within a child's grave. At first it seemed unremarkable, a simple pot, its rim decorated with spiral carvings, yet alongside it lay a wooden spoon, preserved by mineralization, and faint traces of cereal grains clinging to the inner surface. The discovery was dismissed at the time as a burial offering of food, but in the decades that followed, researchers began connecting it with the very tale later recorded by the Brothers Grimm. Strikingly similar vessels have been unearthed in burial mounds in Denmark, Sweden, and even as far away as the Baltic coast. In each case, the pots were associated with children or young women, often buried with symbolic objects such as seeds, ladles, or miniature cauldrons. To some scholars, this suggested a ritual role. The pot is a vessel of eternal nourishment, promising sustenance to the soul in the afterlife. Even more remarkable was a discovery made in 1963 in northern India, where a temple excavation revealed inscriptions referring to a pot of inexhaustible grain. Scholars quickly noted the similarity to the Hindu Akshaya Patra. Was this a coincidence, or evidence of an ancient story pattern that spanned continents? Comparative folklorists mapped the tale type known as a TU 563, the table, the ass, and the stick, finding it across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Variants involved a pot, a tablecloth, or a horn, each producing endless food. Yet the German tale of the porridge pot stands out for its peculiar ending. The flood, the village drowned in food, and the dangerous excess of blessing turned curse. From these findings, many experts now argue that the story originated from a deep, prehistoric source. Perhaps it is a memory of agricultural societies, where abundance and famine were constantly intertwined. Perhaps it is even older, a myth of humanity's first encounter with grain itself, thousands of years ago. What seems like a childish cautionary fable may in truth be a ritual encoded in story form. Let us decode its symbols. The magical pot is not simply cookware. In ancient symbolism, the vessel often represents the womb, the earth, and the cosmos. It is the container of life, the space where raw material is transformed into nourishment. In Celtic mythology, cauldrons held the power to resurrect the dead. In Greek tradition, amphorae carried the sacred wine of Dionysus. The pot in our tale may carry the same symbolic weight, a microcosm of creation itself. The endless porridge is more than food. Grain has long been a symbol of life, rebirth, and divine gift. Wheat and barley were central to Demeter's cult in Greece, and rice was sacred in Asia. To drown in porridge, as the villagers nearly did, is to drown in the overwhelming power of life force itself, uncontrolled and unbalanced. The girl, young and innocent, is the initiate, granted sacred words that command the vessel. She embodies the chosen mediator between humanity and the divine. Her mother, who forgets the command, is the flawed successor, representing human error and the failure to respect ritual boundaries. This duality reflects the ancient fear that sacred knowledge, if mishandled, leads to disaster. Even the spoken commands echo ritual incantations. Ancient magic often depended on precise words. Forgetting them or misusing them meant breaking the bond between human and spirit. The flood of porridge, therefore, is not mere comedy. It is a symbolic warning. Abundance without wisdom leads to destruction. Viewed this way, the Magic Porridge Pot is no light-hearted nursery tale. It is a memory of ritual, myth, and sacred danger. The pot does not only cook porridge, it simmers with the energy of creation and destruction, life and death. It is an artifact of myth, disguised as bedtime entertainment. The story of the Magic Porridge Pot that you thought was just a whimsical tale for children turns out to be something far deeper. It is a convergence of fairy tale, spirituality, archaeology, and ancient myth. Beneath its simple rhythm lies a profound truth about humanity's struggle with food, survival, and divine blessing. The vessel is not merely a cooking pot. It is the womb of the earth, the cauldron of gods, the grave offering for souls in their journey beyond. The little girl is not merely a character of innocence, but the shadow of a priestess, an initiate who holds the words of power. And the flood of porridge is not comic exaggeration, but a vision of abundance turned to chaos, a memory of floods and famines that shaped entire civilizations. To read this story as only a child's tale is to miss its weight. It is an echo of rituals whispered by firelight, a survival of beliefs carved into pots and buried with the dead, a myth passed from mouth to mouth across continents and millennia. The next time you hear the words cook, little pot, cook, remember that you are hearing more than a fairy tale. You are touching the edge of humanity's oldest fears and hopes: hunger and plenty, control and chaos, life and death. And if that realization unsettles you, wait until you uncover the next story, because every fairy tale is an artifact, and every artifact holds a secret waiting to be unearthed.